and who they are, that doesn't really make them who they are. Thank you.
Wow, I love you, Tiffany. I can't believe I have to follow that. Okay. Do you remember when you would come home from school, grab a snack, and turn on Nick or something? All those big kids who looked like they had it made and they knew everything about life while you were just trying to learn your 8 times table? Well, I still don't know my 8 times table. I really don't know it. But I do know a little something about life I didn't know back then. The following are lists I've been compiling since I was 16. Sometimes smiling uncontrollably, sometimes crying uncontrollably, and sometimes desperately trying to sound wise. So, lessons learned in 2015. Don't date anyone you can't be yourself with. Don't stay with that person out of habit. A breakup is like a nuclear explosion. The real pain comes with fallout. There will always be other guys. Remember, love is just a bunch of hormones fucking with you. There will always be other guys. Remember, love is just a bunch of hormones fucking with you. If you stay bitter, you only hurt yourself. Try not to say I love you if you don't mean it, although sometimes it's impossible not to. It's far easier to hurt someone than you would believe. So as you can probably tell, my junior year of high school was mostly spent falling in and out of love and obsessing over boys and trying to get over heartbreak. After my first long-term relationship ended rather dramatically, I learned a lot about myself. Some things were good. I realized I had really great friends and a well of positivity and humor just inside of me ready to get me through. Some things weren't so good. I realized I had a vengeful streak when I started a smear campaign against the girl my ex cheated on me with. Her name was Juliet. Incidentally, that was also the year I learned how to take my frustration out on creative projects. I wrote a play. It was a dark spin on Romeo and Juliet. It was really bad. But damn, it felt so good writing it. It felt so good. But yeah, if there's one thing I learned in 2015, it's that it's really easy to lose yourself in a relationship and to let that other person define you. And if you and to let that other person define you. But you have to find time to just be yourself, not just somebody's girlfriend, somebody's boyfriend, somebody's whatever. And if all goes to shit, just write a play, or whatever helps you cope. Lessons learned in 2016. Love your friends. Don't lash out. Take 2 halves of ecstasy spaced out by 2 hours if you don't want to puke. Don't hitchhike alone. Okay. Be organized. Tell the truth. Music can free your soul. Stay in the present moment. My senior year of high school was one of the best of my life, and one I look back on really fondly and somewhat nostalgically. I took all the frustration of having grown up safe and risk-free in a nice house, and I decided I wanted to live my life like Jack Kerouac was narrating it. Possibly not the best year to be a hippy-dippy bandana wearer, what with like colleges to apply to and high school to graduate from, and my life to plan. Not to mention saying goodbye to the life I had led for the past 17 years. I spent the year, of course, being in love as usual, and I also got really close to some friends that I'd known for a really long time, and I met new friends, and I did some crazy shit that I never thought I could ever do, and it was amazing. What I do wish I had done was just not been such a stoner, and focused a little more on school, and spent time with my parents who are going through a really rough time. Anyway, lessons learned in 2017. Don't rush romance. Use protection. Yes. Oh yes. Create, innovate, reuse, think. Don't spread events and dramatize them to make yourself seem like a victim. Don't judge people before you get to know them. Know when you need help. Clean your fucking room. Seriously. And forgot. Whatever. I still don't know if taking a gap year was a good idea for me. I know that that's like politically incorrect because gap years are supposed to be really, really fun, like amazing adventure times, but I just don't know if I had a good time. I've never been an adventurous person. I never really liked traveling that much, but here I was signing up on a 3-month trip to Asia out of frustration for not having gone into most of the colleges I'd applied to. By the time I landed in India for the second time to begin a 2-month teaching job, the high of my senior year had worn off, and I was pretty unhappy. I was alone, and I had no crush to distract me, only someone back home to long for. I spent my 19th birthday throwing up from a stomach bug I caught, and then I had to plan my own birthday party, which was attended by a few eccentric old people that I met. It was fun. I realized pretty early on in the year that I was not the wanderlust-loving traveler type that I wish I could have been. And although I felt like I had cheated myself, I decided to stick it out and stay with the teaching job, and I loved my students, so that was great. I kind of thought that smoking whatever they had down there would kind of get me through, but that wasn't enough. I bought giant pieces of white paper, and I began drawing hours every night. And I got really good, and the characters that I created kept me company in a sense. Being lonely in a foreign place is really, really hard. And cutting yourself off from friends and family can leave a huge hole in your chest. So at any time, if you feel like going home is something you need, then don't ignore it. Lessons learned in 2018 so far. When you feel overwhelmed, focus on your environment. Take in the colors, the sounds, the wind on your cheeks. Always confront people if you're interpreting their behavior in extremes. Stop going out with guys you don't like. Please. Everyone has a story, listen to it. Lorelai Gilmore is not your mother. Stop wishing she were. Be funny, but don't be a cynic. It's okay to cry. Work out to feel good, not as a kind of punishment. Again, clean your fucking room. I forgot. Oh, yes. They say that when you get to college, you should look out for the freshman 15. And I did. I watched my physical weight so closely that I forgot to check on my emotional weight. And soon it felt like my feet were heavy, my heart weighed like a ton, and I never needed to nap so much in my life. College is a lot harder than I thought it would be. Not every day, but some days. And I've made some amazing friends. And I'm glad to be more independent, but it is a struggle sometimes. The pressure we're under to know what we want to do, to become real adults, whatever that means, and to just figure things out. But I think that, honestly, the best thing you can do, and if you have to leave with one word of advice from me, it's just to keep a sense of humor. Keep a sense of humor, and accept advice wherever you can get it. And hopefully one day you'll wake up in a penthouse with all your shit figured out and a Lamborghini.
So growing up, my dad told me 3 things. To be independent, bottle things up if you need to, and never cry. Now, those who know me, I am very, very animated. I'm a weird fucking kid. SpongeBob is my favorite TV show. Patrick is my spirit animal. I'm a crazy Disney fan, and I speak in a different language when I talk to my best friends. Iba, let's get la Now, me and my father are very, very close. I was adopted, and he found me in Baltimore, Maryland, when I was about 2 weeks old. He was down there for a golfing tournament, which he ended up losing. But he brought me home without even telling my mom. So from right when he found me and growing up, we were very, very close. And he was the only person that I wanted in my life, that I could talk to, and that I could be around. In middle school, I remember not being very social, never talking to anybody, always just wanting to go home and just hang out with my dad. We'll watch videos, we'll play basketball, we'll listen to music, we'll walk, we'll do whatever we want. And going into the 7th grade, we were riding our bikes in Canton, Massachusetts, and we stopped at a red light, and I remember him looking at me and saying, "What do you want to do when you're older? Or what do you want to be when you're older?" I was like, "Dad, I don't know. Just whatever you're doing, I want to do that exactly." And when the light turned green, for some reason I didn't go, he did, and a car hit his bike. And I watched him fall, and I was just still on my bike, just not doing anything. So I remember what he told me. He said, "Bottle things up, be independent, and never cry." So that's exactly what I did. I walked over to him, I sat down, and I was just blank-faced. And I didn't know what to do. First responders were there and everything, but I was just sitting here really not understanding what happened. And he broke his collarbone, but he was fine, and thank God. Fast forward into high school. I'm still the same antisocial kid who just wants to go home and chill with his dad. And at this point, I grew about 8 inches, and I started playing basketball. So the more I started playing basketball, the less I started to see him. And that really bothered me because he's my idol. And sophomore year of high school, I found out that he lost both of his kidneys. And he didn't tell any of my other siblings either until he was hospitalized. So we got a call from Mom saying, "Pop-Pop's in the hospital." I'm like, "Well, why?" He said, "Well, he lost both of his kidneys." I was like, "When?" He didn't tell us anything. Why wouldn't he tell us anything? And my mom said, "Because he doesn't want you to feel sorry for him." I'm like, "Well, how? Like, this is my world. I'm going to feel sorry for him whenever I need to, because he is what I want to be when I'm older." And they put him on dialysis, and he's currently still on dialysis. Not doing so well, but I mean, he's trucking along. But because of his loss of his 2 kidneys, I shut a lot of people out of my life, a lot. Former best friends, coaches, teachers, a lot of my family members. And I realized that bottling things up and staying independent is only eats you inside. And I've been dealing with this for all throughout my college career now with him. I'm at home doing dialysis, him not, coming to my games, not being at my high school graduation, not meeting my girlfriend, or being able to take me to school, whatever the case may be. But if I could go back to the day where he was hit on the street, I wish I would have cried then and helped him, because now when I look at it now, I feel like I'm a completely different person. And it's just one thing where if there's someone who needs help, and if there's someone or if you need help, if you keep it bottled in for years that I have, then nothing is going to go well. But I promise you, I'm a lot better now, a lot better. He's up and walking, he's driving, he's going to my games now. Things are really looking up, but as of today, I'm trying to be the best person I can be because of him. Thank you.
I grew up with everything I wanted and more. But I feel like I grew up in a different world. One that was more like a fairy tale. I had the perfect childhood. My parents made our home a shelter from the real world, and they raised my sisters and I to believe that we're invincible. The country I lived in was so beautiful and so peaceful, nothing could ever go wrong. I feel like I'm 21, but I've already lived 2 different lives, and if I were to go back now and tell my younger self how the future is going to be, she wouldn't believe it, because I still don't believe it sometimes. In the blink of an eye, my whole world turned. When I was 15, I lost my home. I lost my Syria. Within a few months, we had to escape war and move. I was too young to understand what was going on. All I cared about was that I was leaving my friends, I was leaving my school, I was leaving my perfect, happy life. But I adapted to my new environment. A year later, when I was 16, I lost my shelter. I lost my family. My Superman, my father, who was supposed to live forever, was gone. And he wasn't coming back. The following months were a blur. I didn't understand what was happening. Everyone around me was breaking down, but I was just numb. What's happening? Where is he? Where did he go? I don't understand. All I felt was anger. I was angry at myself for not feeling. I was angry at the world for doing this. And I was angry about the fact that not only did I lose my dad, but I ended up losing my whole family. You see, within a few months, my sister was off to college. And then my mom went from being a full-time mom who's so over-involved to a full-time working single mother who has to provide for 3 kids. So she traveled for months at a time. I wasn't used to that. It was just me and my younger sister who was 12. She was dealing with the loss of her dad and her mom. I was too. I couldn't take care of her. Why did I have to? This was all coming out as anger, not sadness. So I decided I'm just gonna shut everything off. I never talked about it. I never asked for help. I just said, you know what? I'm gonna do what I feel. And I wasn't feeling anything. Then I moved to college. And I realized, you know what? This is a blank page. I can tell people what I want to tell them. I don't have to tell them what I've been through. I can say my own story. Until this one time. I was sitting alone, and I remembered this day. A day when I had to take my little sister to her parent-teacher meeting because my mom was away for work. And that day, her teacher asked me if there were any problems at home, because my sister was acting out. I said, of course not. I was so embarrassed. What do you mean problems at home? We're not troubled girls. I was actually offended. But the truth was, there were problems at home. There were really big problems at home. I was choosing not to see them, and I was choosing to ignore everything. So with that mentality in college, that worked. For 3 years, that worked. I was so happy. I was ignoring everything. I was here. I was having so much fun. But then senior year came, and that stopped working. All of a sudden, I felt I was so moody. I was easily ticked off. I hated everyone. I just wanted to be alone. That's when I realized that all my feelings were coming back. 5 years of suppressing my feelings, all of a sudden they were coming back, and I didn't know how to deal with them. So I would just smoke weed, get drunk, go sleep, I don't know, just do anything to escape because I don't want to feel. I'm not used to feeling. And also, these feelings, this didn't seem like my life. My life was so peaceful, my life was so nice. I don't want to feel bad things. This lasted for a while, for about 5 or 6 months of denial. Denial that I am depressed. It is 5 years later, but I am depressed. Because I suppressed so many feelings that 5 years later, eventually they came out. I didn't understand. Why was I reacting so late? So I didn't talk to anyone. Because who's going to understand 5 years later what I'm feeling? I don't understand what I'm feeling. It took me a while, and it took me a lot of pressure. But I finally went, and I got help. I went to therapy, and I sat down, and I talked. And I talked, and I talked, and I talked. And the hour ended, and I talked more, and I didn't want to leave. I realized I didn't want to talk. I had to talk. I have 5 years of talking to do. So I went twice a week, and this week I went twice a week, and I'm always calling her, and I'm always talking because I need to talk. And it's okay to talk. I'm not dramatic, and I'm not dragging people into my life. These things happen, and if you don't talk about them, doesn't mean they're not happening. So yes, there are problems at home. And yes, I will talk about them.
Hi. So I want to start this off by saying this semester has been really incredible. I have never opened up to a group of random strangers like this. And it has really, like, I don't know if it's a good thing or bad thing, but now my emotions are just kind of running wild. And I think it's a new beginning because of you guys. So thank you. So I did not know what to say when I thought about this presentation. And I had no idea what message I wanted to say. And instead of torturing myself trying to figure out what to say, I decided to just talk about not knowing and accepting that you don't have to know everything and it's okay to just exist. So here it goes. Tell me about yourself. Tell me who you are. Questions I ask myself, but I don't get real far. I just can't figure out who I want to be. I just can't make up my mind, can't set myself free. But is it really necessary to know who I am? And do you really think that I can be just one thing? I am a million things and more, you'll see. One thing about myself, I love really hard. I hate the taste of milk, and I travel real far. I am a dog person, and I love to sing. I am a changing girl, not just one thing, not just one thing, not just one thing. The human body is a complex system of bones, organs, veins, capillaries, and so much more. There are 206 bones in the human body and 5 essential organs. And having anxiety is like having those 5 organs tied together and pressing on all of your 206 bones. I would know I felt anxious for as long as I can remember. Not constantly, that's not what I mean. I mean, like, it's triggered by something, and it grabs control of my life, like I'm a puppet with somebody else pulling the strings. But there was one day that I decided to cut those strings, to devote everything I have to living more happy, more carefree, less anxious. To not live my life being controlled by something else. I went to camp for 7 years of my life, and when I first started, I was really young, only about 9 years old. I was horribly, horribly, horribly homesick, and I sobbed every single day to go home. I begged with counselors and managers to please just send me home, and nobody would listen. It got a bit better when I met some girls in the cabin next door. But honestly, the best part about being in their cabin wasn't any of them. It was their old, cool counselor, Amy. Now, she was awesome. Now, I mean really awesome. She was the type of counselor that would talk to us, gossip with us, tell us about her boy problems and all the drama on camp. But more than that, she really cared about us. She always wanted to know about our lives and always know what to do if one of us was upset. She was my counselor for the next 4 years for 8 weeks every summer. But she was so much more than that. She was one of us. She was our lifeline. She was exactly who I went to in any situation. Whether it was at home or at camp, Amy was always the person there. When she stopped coming back to camp one summer, I was devastated. So horribly sad that she wasn't going to be a part of my summers anymore. And for the next 2 years, we had some pretty crappy counselors, but let's face it, no one was going to compare to Amy. When I went back to camp when I was 16, I was a counselor. I lived in cabin 9A with 12 10-year-old girls, and it was the first cabin I had had Amy in. As a counselor, I took her old bed space. It was a really weird but happy coincidence, and it made me feel a sense of pride. And it also worked as a reminder to me that I had to be to these girls what Amy had been to me when I was their age. No matter the frustration I felt, I could never take it out on them. I got back to my cabin late one day after lunch, and all of my campers were already there with my co-counselor. When I got onto the porch, 3 of them busted through the door. "Shauna, Becca came looking for you. Her face was all red. She looked like she was crying." They were a little sassy. But Becca had been having problems with the management of our camp for some time now, so it's possible she could have been upset about that. I started walking up the hill to her cabin, and she spotted me from her seat outside. "Shauna, hey Beck, what's up?" She was sobbing. "Shauna, did you see your phone? Shauna, check your text. Shauna, did you see Susanna's text? Shauna, please check." I reached into my back pocket and read the text from my old counselor, Susanna. I shrieked on the top of my lungs and collapsed to the floor. "Shauna, I'm so sorry. Amy got into a car accident last night. She died." I started repeating, "No, no, 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 this can't be true. It just can't be," over and over and over again. And I looked up at Becca, and I could see that her face was seeming hopeful, like maybe somehow what I was saying could have been true. And I knew I had to stop. I felt empty. The rest of the day I remember in great detail, but I'll spare it to you for the sake of time. But at the end of the day, Becca, our friend Hannah, and I, Amy's only campers left on camp, walked down to the lake where she used to work. We craved feeling some kind of connection to her, and seeing her signatures and quotes she had written on the boathouse walls gave that connection some muted electricity. But it was painful to think that that electricity would forever be muted, that it would never be the same that it was before. We all jumped in the water together. And then as we dried off in the boathouse, we told our favorite stories of Amy. We cried in that boathouse, but we also laughed. And I think that made some of us feel a little guilty. But Amy was always so happy and so carefree and funny, how could we not laugh? As I packed for her funeral, I thought of Amy. I thought about the fact that she had just turned 23. She had just graduated college. She was barely an adult. She had her whole life ahead of her. She was hit by a drunk driver and she died. This wasn't a "it won't happen to me" situation. This happened to someone I know, to someone I love, to someone I care about. I realized it can happen to anyone. It can happen to you, or it can happen to me, because our bodies are made up of 206 bones that can all crack and 5 essential organs that can all be damaged. Because our bodies can break and no one is indestructible. I thought about Amy and the way she lived her life. She was always so happy and carefree, and she had lived every single moment of it to the fullest. And I knew she had been happy with it, how it had been so far. I thought about my own life and my anxiety and the puppet on the strings, and this was the day that I decided to cut them, to not be held back by a mental illness, to look for the positives in every situation. A few years later, I read a quote titled "The Station." At the end of the quote, the author says, So stop pacing the aisles and counting the miles. Instead, climb more mountains, eat more ice cream, go barefoot more often, swim more rivers, watch more sunsets, laugh more, cry less. The station will come soon enough. So I decided to devote my life to that as well. Because life is short. Because my body and my life are precious and I should never take them for granted. Because because we should strive for happiness any chance we get, because this life is the only chance we have to achieve it. Because life must be lived as you go along. If not, what's the point?
When my parents got divorced, my world fell apart. I never ever thought I could ever go through something like that. I didn't know how to feel, what that meant for our family, or what to do. Couldn't talk to anyone of my parents comfortably because, it felt awkward. And I couldn't really talk to anyone else because I was just embarrassed about the situation. In the 6th grade in boarding school, I became really withdrawn because I was worried about what people would think if they found out the truth about my family. Life wasn't going according to plan. It wasn't as smooth and comfortable as I expected it to be. And the worst part was there was nothing I could do that could fix that. So to cope, I began to tell little white lies that would, seem to perfume the foul smell. If friends would come over and ask where my dad was, I would say he had traveled, when really he had moved out and was living in Abuja, the capital of Nigeria. Friends would also ask why I had a house in Abuja and I was going back and forth between Abuja and Lagos where I live. And I would just say, well, my family just had 2 houses. We just like to chill in both at different times. Friends would also ask why my mom couldn't come on vacation with my dad, my brother, and I. And I would say, well, she had stayed back to take care of our aging grandfather, which was true, but not the real reason why she couldn't come. After some time, my dad got remarried, and it just further complicated things because it was difficult to, stick to the script I had drawn for myself. I had to remember who I had told what lie, what to tell people, where to pick off from where I left off. And friends would come visit, and then they'd see my dad's wife's picture on the walls, and they'd ask, who is that? And I'd say, well, that's my aunt, because saying that didn't cut as deeply as actually having to say who she really was. I just didn't want to answer any more irritating questions about my family. Now, honestly, some of the lies I told were more half-truths than actual lies, but every distorted response I gave wore me out because there really was no denying the fact that my parents were divorced. There's nothing that was going to change that. For years, I hated that this was part of my life. It just wasn't, I never imagined that it would ever happen, and I was really disappointed in my parents for not making things work because I honestly believe I have the best parents, but just this bad stain of divorce, it just wouldn't go away. I desperately tried to